Who was the first person? So we begin with myths. All tribes in the world, I think, have origin myths. Anthropologists have studied these. Anthropologists have found a great richness, a beautiful, elegant richness of origin myths from all over the world, and I just picked out 3 or 4 of them from my book, including the Jewish myth of Adam and Eve, which is familiar to anybody in Judeo-Christian or indeed Islamic culture because they all have inherited the Jewish myth. There's nothing special about it, and I haven't included the Judeo-Christian myth in all the chapters, but it's, in some chapters I threw it in, along with the other myths, just to, as it were, bring home the point to the child that there is nothing special about it. It's just one out of thousands of myths from tribes all over the world. Who was the first person, really? We now come to the science. And this is a bit odd, but there never was a first person. Because every person had to have parents, and those parents had to be people too. And they had to have parents, and they had to be people too. Same thing with rabbits. There never was a first rabbit, never a first crocodile, never a first dragonfly. Every creature ever born, with perhaps a tiny number of exceptions, every individual creature ever born belonged to the same species as its parents. If you handed its parents and it and its children to a taxonomist, they would have put them into the same species. And yet, if you go back far enough, we of course come to radically different species. It sounds a bit paradoxical. I'm going to obviously dispel that paradox in a moment. First, a thought experiment. Thought experiment, one that you do in your head, but you don't actually do it, you couldn't do it. Find a picture of yourself and place on top of it a picture of your father. A photograph of yourself, photograph of your father, ordinary postcard size, and then a photograph of his father, and then his father, and his father, and go on piling up this great stack of picture postcards. You've got to go back long before the invention of photography, but this is a thought experiment after all. How many generations shall we go back? How many picture postcards shall we slap on top of each other? I suggest a nice round number, 185 million. How high would it be? Well, if each picture was a normal picture postcard, it would form a tower about 220,000 feet high. That's more than 180 New York skyscrapers stacked on top of each other. It would fall over. So let's, in our thought experiment, tip it on its side and arrange these photographs in a long bookshelf. How long would it be? About 40 miles. But we're now in a position to walk along the bookshelf. At one end of the bookshelf is a picture of you, and at the other end of the bookshelf is a picture of your 185 million great-grandfather. What did he look like? An old man with wispy hair and white side whiskers? A caveman in a leopard skin? Forget any such thought. We don't know exactly what he looked like, but fossils give us a pretty good idea. Your 185 million great-grandfather looked something like this. He was a fish. So was your 185 million great-grandmother. Just as well. So we now walk along our 40-mile bookshelf, pulling pictures off it one by one, to have a look at them. Every picture shows a creature clearly of the same species as its immediate neighbours in the line, both its parents and its children. As much alike as any two members, contemporary members of the same species look alike, any two people in this room, say. Yet we walk steadily along the line from one end to the other, we eventually come to a fish. It's not that paradoxical, is it? Does that mean? It's not that paradoxical. We're quite used to gradual change, tiny step-by-step change, building up to a lot of change. We were all once babies, Then we turned into toddlers, then we turned into children, then into teenagers, and then into young adults, then into middle-aged adults, then into old adults, and so on. But there was never any abrupt change. There was never a night where somebody went to bed middle-aged and then woke up the next morning and said, "Oh, I seem to be old."